right. Happy Tuesday afternoon, everybody. You guys are here with me, Amy. I'm filling in for Greg today on the Con-Versation. And our guest today is Phillip Fracassi, who is an award-winning horror writer and screenplay writer. So welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Oh, I know, right? I just talked to you yesterday. I'm telling you, we're long-lost friends for sure. So I would love to dive in. I always like to go like in the mind of writers, especially horror writers. That's my favorite genre. So I would love to kind of just kick off the conversation with what gave you the itch or the bug to start writing, and how did you find that horror was what you wanted to write in?
Well, yeah, I mean, I got the itch, the bug, the virus, very early age. I started writing when I was in third grade. I very vivid memory of writing a creative story as an assignment and reading in front of the class. And it's like, I think probably the first time an actor takes the stage or whatever, and they get applause. It was one of those things where it was just such an impactful moment. And I was like, wow, this is something I'm actually good at. And I kind of kept writing and writing. And from there, I was, as my whole life, I've been writing. I was writing horror stories in seventh grade math class, and horror comics, and self-publishing them. So by self-publishing, I mean stapling together the pages and copying them in the teacher's lounge and selling them for a buck a piece. But yeah, I think a lot of writers have that kind of like background where you're just like, you catch this you kind of said it well, which is you catch this bug and it's infectious, and it's all I've ever wanted to do. And I grew up reading horror, but interestingly, I didn't really start writing horror until 2015, because I kind of spent my whole life. I mean, when I was a kid, I wrote a lot of horror, but then as I got a little bit older, I think I had this kind of like, I think I had it sort of in my head that I had when you were writing for realsies, you had to kind of write stuff that was more like serious or more literary or more dramatic, and I didn't really know at that time that you could do all those things and write genre fiction. And I was writing some screenplays in 2010, 2011, and I was shopping them around. I had meetings with like Blumhouse and CBS, and nothing really stuck or got greenlit. And then around 2015, I made the kind of light bulb going off, lightning striking kind of epiphany that I should try and start writing, doing what I'm doing my screenplay work, and try and start writing it as fiction. And so I wrote a story called Mother in 2015 and sold it to the first publisher I sent it to. And since then, I've just been kind of going nonstop.
Wow. It started with just short stories, and then you're self-publishing of stapling them and selling for $1. I love that. That is the most creative. Yeah. I love that. Like, kudos to you. You got your hustle on when you were younger. And so I love that. Like, that's just, it's so fascinating to me. So I know that you have won a lot of awards and stuff. So what was that, winning your first award is, I mean, I know that that's pivotal for all writers, right? We all strive to win awards and everything like that. But was that really like a changing point for you where you're like, oh, I could really do this full time. I have something, or, when was that pivotal point for you?
I had kind of a weird start to my writing career I'm doing air quotes, in that, in that I was publishing stories and I was getting some traction, and I made a deal with the publisher to do a story collection, and I was very excited. And that story collection came out, and yeah, it was named best story collection of the year from This Is Horror, and I was kind of feeling like I was firing on all cylinders. And then I had like a bit of a wake up call, in the sense that I began to understand more about publishing, and the profession of publishing. And I realized that the relationship that I had with my publisher, my business relationship and my personal relationship, wasn't correct, wasn't where I would want it to be. Because I have a business and a marketing background. I worked in, I worked in the music industry as an executive for a decade. I ran my own business for a decade. So, and I worked at a marketing agency. So I have, I had these kind of other little skill sets, and I have enough of those skill sets to realize that like what was happening wasn't necessarily fair. And so I had to take my first book, my baby, uh, out of print by choice,
Wow.
not knowing where it would land or if it would land somewhere else, not knowing what the future held. But I just knew that the situation I was in was not the situation I wanted to stay in. And so there was a lot of that kind of up and down for the first, few years. And but now things seem to be smoothing out. I found some good homes for all my books. I have a lot of stuff coming out in the future, so I feel like I've got a right now. I've got a good agent. I'm on my third agent. So I feel like I finally have the kind of a good setup now for moving forward. But it's hard to get it all right.
Yeah. I mean, I hear that all the time, right? I'm a firm believer in no matter how many books you publish, right? The publishing journey always has, peaks and valleys. It's different every time you publish a book. It doesn't matter if it's your first book or if it's your 500th book, the journey is always different, right? And if it's a
Yeah.
different publisher or whatever, and learning the ways that they operate and do stuff. So I think I hear that all the time. So I think that that's amazing, how your background really kind of fed into, well, okay, this isn't really working, so we're gonna switch gears. And you were bold enough to unpublish your book and stuff, because I know some people would be like, oh well, I don't want to unpublish anything, I have traction going and stuff.
Yeah, because you're talking. This was like my lifelong dream, and yeah, the two hardest decisions I made were to separate myself from that publisher and get all my rights back, and also when I had to let go of my first agent. Those were two very hard moments because they were critical and necessary. But yeah, they were difficult because this is what I had been working my whole life toward, and so it felt really like it felt like a dangerous move to do those things. But ultimately, it worked out. And to answer your question, I kind of went around it. But regarding the award thing, it was very validating. I kind of I think it was one of those things where obviously it makes you feel good. It makes you feel that that people are enjoying your work, and that's a very satisfying feeling. I think that for me, it's always like I'm always looking at what's next. I don't spend a lot of time in the present, so I like awards are nice. I was a finalist for the Stoker Award this past year for one of my story collections, and they're great. But I'm really so focused on what's happening over the next 2 or 3 years and I'm setting myself up for success, for future success, that I don't spend a ton of time thinking about the present. But it is very nice because I like to know that readers are enjoying the work. It's very satisfying, and it's why I'm ultimately doing what I do. So yeah, awards are a nice way of kind of representing that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, your readers and stuff are what drive you to continue writing, right? Because they like the way that you write and the stories that you write. And so I love that. And I think, I think part of that, a lot of that, I think feeds to your success as a writer is you're focusing on, okay, well, this is great. Yeah, amazing. All right. So what's next for me? What can I do next? How can I
Right.
kind of push your own limits in a sense, which I think is always good because you're like stretching your creativity muscle, right? How far can you go? Right. So that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
feeds, I mean, that feeds into, a question, I guess, that I have, just to kind of derail a little bit, right? What is your favorite horror movie or type of horror movie?
My favorite horror movie is The Thing.
Oh, the old one or the new one?
Oh no, the original,
Okay.
the John Carpenter 1982. Yeah, The Thing.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, that's my favorite horror movie. Probably my favorite movie. Period. I didn't mind the second one. There was sort of a prequel, I guess. I didn't mind it. But it wasn't the original. And I would say kind of like a 1B would be Jaws, and then I would say like a 1C would be Aliens. Those
Man,
are my
okay.
those are my three like favorite movies.
I
So
love
those are ones I watch again and again and again.
Yeah, no. Oh my gosh, I love those. I've never had anyone else like The Thing, like the OG original Thing,
What?
right?
Wow.
No one's ever said that to me, and I'm like, "Oh man, you're missing out." Like,
Well,
I
I mean,
always
it's the
like
greatest film ever made, so I don't know how people wouldn't like it.
I
That's
know. I mean,
weird.
it's so great. I watch it every Halloween season, like the original one. The new one, was okay, but there's just something about the original one. Like, I'm also a huge fan of like the original like Halloween and
Oh
Nightmare on
yeah.
Street, like the original ones, like you just don't touch those, like that's how I feel. I'm like, just leave them where they are.
Yeah, I
So
think what makes the original thing so great, honestly, is Kurt Russell. I think Kurt Russell is so great in that film, and he's just. I mean, his performance in that film is unreal. And I was actually able to take my son to see the thing. It was showing in a theater here in Los Angeles a couple of years ago now, just pre-pandemic. So we got to go see it on the big screen, and he loved it too. So that was the first time I had seen it on the big screen. So that was kind of cool.
man, I'm so jealous of your son. That's like the ultimate goal,
I
right?
also took him to see Jaws on the big screen, which was about a year ago, and that was
Oh
pretty
my
cool too.
gosh. So
Yeah,
here in Texas, I haven't done it, but I want to. They let you like not float the river, but you can be in tubes and stuff, and they only play it at night, and you sit in the water and watch the movie Jaws. And to
yeah,
me, that's just like the ultimate like suspense. Like you already got me because I know what's gonna happen in Jaws, but now I'm in the water, I'm like, oh, I
yeah.
live for that. I live
Well,
for that.
I have a good Jaws anecdote, very quick one. So when I was, I think I was probably like, I don't know when it came out, probably 10. When Jaws 3 came out,
Mhm.
um, Jaws 3D, right? Horrible film. But my mother took me and my brother, who were both small children. She took us to the theater to see Jaws 3D, and we were in Ocean City at the time. And when we left the theater, it had been there had been a torrential rain while we were watching the film, and when we left the theater, the streets had flooded, so we had to wade
Oh
through
wow.
literally hip deep water to get back to our condo that we were staying at from the movie theater. And after just seeing Jaws, so you can imagine what we were thinking as being little kids walking back, in hip deep water for half a mile um, after seeing Jaws. It was a pretty cool follow up experience.
Yeah, no, oh my gosh, it's like my ultimate goal is to go see the Jaws movie in a tube in the water, just because
Yeah,
I'm already like, I haven't even gone yet, and I've already psyched myself out like, okay, Jaws is totally gonna be in the water, it's gonna attack me, I'm gonna watch this film, I'm gonna die watching this film, and I'm already like, well,
you just have
okay,
to, as long as you accept that going in, yeah,
right?
you can really enjoy the experience. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So I know that you are often compared to Stephen King at, peak creepiness, right? And Stephen King to me, I have read all of his books. I love his book and his writing, right? And I would love to just like get in the mind of Stephen King. So to me, he's like, the king of all kings of horror. And
Of
so the
course.
fact that you're compared to him, I mean, that's amazing. Congratulations, because that's to me is just the biggest honor. So
Yeah,
I don't cool.
it's humbling. I think the comparison. I don't think anybody will ever. Sometimes when you see a lot of those like articles, those clickbait articles, the next Stephen King, this, the next Stephen King, that. I don't think there will ever be another Stephen King. What he
No.
has done, how prolific he is, and his unbelievable imagination and track record of, he's no one will ever touch King in my opinion. But I think what happens is people search for comparisons, and what I take from those when people mention King or Robert McCammon or Ray Bradbury, which is three names that get thrown out a lot when people are reviewing my work, I think they're trying more to kind of classify me as a type of horror, meaning the stuff I write is probably more thriller, mainstream thriller with like supernatural and horrific elements versus like splatterpunk or body horror or something kind of aliens and zombies and that kind of stuff. I
Yeah.
feel like that's kind of more why they do those comparisons, but it's always humbling to be compared to any established writer. Is always humbling, and I'm always grateful for folks who say stuff like that. But yeah, if I had but he's my hero. He's the guy I look up to and emulate. I don't try and mimic King's writing. I don't think you could, especially since his writing has changed so dramatically over the last 30 years. Um, but I do take lessons from his work, just like I take lessons from a lot of things that I read. And he's a genius. He is in some ways almost underappreciated as a writer and as a storyteller because he's so popular that I think people just feel like it's fluff, it's Dan Brown. It's just like,
Yeah.
and it's not. He's a beautiful writer, and he's an amazing storyteller. He does things uh, that are very impressive to me as a screenwriter and a novelist. He definitely has tricks that he uses that I study, and it's really inspiring.
Oh yeah, I think for sure. I don't think anyone will ever, be Stephen King in his writing, but the inspiration that he has
Yeah,
helped for so many writers. And so I feel like
absolutely.
being compared and even in the same genre as him is just like, yes,
You know,
I would love it.
I had this thought the other day. I can't remember what I was reading. I was reading something about somebody who was saying how inspired they were and how Stephen King has inspired so many writers. And I had this thought where I was like, I wonder what the present would look like if Stephen King had never existed. I wonder what the present state of horror would look like if Stephen King had never come along. It's an
Yeah.
interesting brain tease because you wonder just how many people would be writing horror right now.
Yeah.
Um,
It would be as big as it is as a genre, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he inspired so many people to write. Uh, that it does kind of sometimes it makes me wonder a little bit what the world would look like if he had never written a book. But I'm glad that's not the case. But it is kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I'm gonna ponder on that the rest of the day for
Yeah.
sure. So we do have a question. They want to know if their 13-year-old would like your work.
Well, that's a double-edged sword kind of question because the answer is yeah, your 13-year-old would probably really love my work. The question is whether you want your 13-year-old to be reading my work is really the problem. Yeah, I think so. I think some of my stories are pretty brutal. I would say this too. So I would say that my novels um, are definitely 13 and up. Just because sometimes with stories in the story collection, there'd be like one or two stories that deal with pretty serious um, issues, that have and I wouldn't want to, you know, scar any child's innocence before it was necessary. But I think the novels, for the most part, are pretty much safe ground. I think the story collections might be something you want to read as a parent first before deciding whether or not to let your 13-year-old read it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of novels, you have a new novel that's coming out called Children Alone with Strangers. So tell us a little bit about that.
Child alone. Yeah,
Yes,
child.
Child Alone.
Yeah, that's it right there. Yeah, it's coming out from Talos Press. It comes out in 1 week from today, actually, on October 25th. But it's up for pre-order now. And yeah, that's a big 600-page crime horror hybrid kitchen sink kind of novel with all these great tropes like telepathic children and monsters in the woods and it's a lot of fun. And so far the early reviews have been really positive, which has been a relief. And and I think that's a novel that's very I wrote it to be just like a lot of fun, a big old school doorstop, horror novel. And I think that I'm hoping that a lot of people will have fun reading it.
Oh, yes, I'm sure. I have read some of the early reviews and I'm very excited about it. We do have another question. They want to know, is it, another reason because there's course language and things like that in your book, or what is the language in your book?
There is much to my mother's disappointment. There is foul language in my books. It's not necessarily over the top. I don't take pleasure in it, but sometimes sometimes it is necessary to get across a character, the way a character would talk or the way a character would think, or to emphasize maybe a moment in a story. You give it a little more of a nudge. So yeah, I would say there's definitely, if I were to do like the movie, the pre movie ratings that you see up on Netflix or whatever, I would say there's language, there's sexual situations, nothing graphic, um and violence, and definitely a lot of gore.
Yeah. So
So
it's my
yeah,
book.
I'd like to think there's not, but then I'll say like I'll give it to somebody, and like the novel I have coming out in July, Boys and I like, to me that's a very like subdued novel. It's very dramatic. And people are like, what are you talking about? This is a horror show. This is horrible. Like there's so much violence and physical brutality. And I'm like, really? Okay. So I don't know. So my sensitivity must be like, just, gone at this point.
Hey, you know what? Me and you both, because for
Yeah.
me, I'm here for it.
Thanks.
I am here for gory books, and sometimes, like old slasher films, sometimes just good slasher films are good, or
Yeah.
gory. I mean,
Yeah. But
I
I'm not,
this.
but like I said earlier, my stuff is definitely not, it's not extreme horror in any way,
Yeah.
sense, or form. It's much more thrillers with very with horrific and elements and a lot of violence for sure throughout.
Yeah.
So sorry. Yeah.
Hey, I understand. I
Sorry.
understand.
Hashtag sorry, not sorry.
So how can people get in touch with you or find your books?
The best way is through my website, which is pfracassi.com. Just like it's spelled in my little thing right here, pfracassi.com. And I have all my books listed there. All my stories are listed there. The link to all the anthologies I've been in. All the pre-order links are on my website. You can also find me on Amazon if you just search my name. All my books are there for the most part. Or I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as well. So you can find me pretty much anywhere.
Nice. And you said that your latest novel comes out on the 25th?
Yeah, Childhood Home Strangers comes out on the 25th of October, and Gothic, which is this novel, comes out very scary. Comes out on in February 2nd, February 3rd, 2023.
Oh, wonderful.
2/3/23. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go and get my copy a week from today of yours, because
Yeah.
I would love to read your book. But thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and talk with me, though you didn't know it was going to be me on the conversation. This has been so much fun, and I am excited to see where you go in the future and for your books and everything to come out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy.
Oh, of course. You guys, Greg will be back for another conversation later this week, and I will see him this week at New Wave Expo. But until then, bye for now, everybody.